Hey guys, welcome back to Team Death Slinger. My name is Peter, and today we're looking at Hexeblaumon. This is one of the decks I was most excited for in EX7. I'm super excited to show you guys my list. We're going to be kind of going more tribal than the silly blue stuff that a lot of people are running. I know you can run Hexeblau with Mirage and Galaxy Loop, stuff like that. This is just going to be Hexeblaumon. So, starting with our eggs, we have one copy of the BT14 Bukamon. Your turn while your opponent has no Digimon with as many or more Digivolution cards as this Digimon gains jamming. So jamming is really important to this deck. Hexeblaumon is only a 12k beater. It's really easy for him to swing into security and die. So I want to make sure that that does not happen. So we are running with the one copy of our jamming egg. Then I like 3 copies of the BT6 Kyaromon. When one of your opponent's Digivolution cards is trash, trigger draw 1. I really like the draw power in this deck. With this egg, sometimes it does feel bad if the opponent has no sources to strip for you to draw cards off of, but for the most part, this egg is going to do a lot of work in this deck and keep your hand full and help you find your pieces. Then we're going 2 copies of the BT5 Bulucomon. The inheritable says your turn once per turn. When you trash a Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon, gain 1 memory. If you want to be really technical and optimized, the promo Gomamon is better than this card. It costs 3 and does the same thing, but I want Bulucomon in my Hexeblaumon deck. I am running this over the Snow Agumon, mostly because the memory gain inheritable is a really nice extender, especially with the tamers that we run in this deck. It's just netting extra memory off of this feels really nice, whereas the strip effect on the Snow Agumon with Iceclad doesn't come up as much because most of our level 4s will let us do the same thing. And after a certain point, you're going to find that that inheritable just doesn't put in a lot of work for you. Whereas when you see this, it will almost always do something. So I do prefer the 2 copies of this over the Snow Agumon. Then I like to run 4 copies of EX6 Biyomon. It does have blocker. Important thing is it has jamming. There's also the Betamon that has jamming, but for me, I like the blocker a little bit more. It's just an extra piece of safety for you. If you have to throw it down as a blocker, you can. But otherwise, this is making sure our Hexeblaumon stack does not die. Then we have 4 copies of the new EX7 Bulucomon. On play, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Add 1 card with Paledramon or Hexeblaumon in its name and 1 card with the Ice Snow trait among them to the hand. Return the rest to the bottom of the deck. Yes, this does whiff some targets, but for the most part, this can find you almost all of your pieces in this deck, except for a rookie. So when attacking, you can trash the top Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon. Great source strip effect. For the most part, I find myself playing this rather than Digivolving into it because I really am more interested in that jamming inheritable. But, you know, if this is your only rookie in hand, it's still totally fine. It's just an excellent searcher, so I like to use it for that purpose. For our level 4s, we are on 2 copies of the EX3 Paledramon. When Digivolving, choose 1 Digivolution card under one of your opponent's Digimon and trash it, and the inheritable says opponent's turn. When an opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards would Digivolve, increase the Digivolution cost by 1. This is still a great tool in this deck. You will strip your opponent's sources, and they still can Digivolve to an extent and kind of do things to you. There's a lot of Digivolution effects now that delete bodies, so by making it more expensive to Digivolve, we are still hurting them, even though they can remove Hexeblau. Granted, with the new Hexeblau, if we strip their sources, they're not swinging anyways, but this just kind of pours a little salt in the wound, and I find it does help when it comes up. Also, the Paledramon name is important because it's a searchable target with our Bulucomon, and we don't have another Ice Snow level 4 to run in this slot. So it's either a Paledramon or something that's not searchable. Then we're going 4 copies of the Sorcerermon from EX7. It has blocker and on play. If your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, one of your Digimon unsuspends. Great effect if you play this with the Absolute Zero or whatever that new option card is called. You can play this from your hand with that card because it has the Ice Snow trait. And the inheritable says when attacking, once per turn, trash a top Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon. We want as much of this inheritable as we can get, so we have 4 copies of this and 4 copies of the EX7 Paledramon. When Digivolving, trash the bottom 2 Digivolution cards of one of your opponent's Digimon. Then if your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, this Digimon gains jamming and blocker until the end of your opponent's turn. What the new support really does for Hexeblaumon is gives you a much more aggressive bottom end. If you have the play, you go first, you have your rookie in the back, and the next turn you Digivolve, you promote into this, you're going to get a jamming check, and that's going to feel really nice. It's a pretty safe check, even if you don't have the Biyomon underneath, and it's nice that the deck can do that. The inheritable also let us strip a source, which is nice for the consistency. This is also going to pair really well with the CrysPaledramon, but we'll get there when we get there. 2 copies of BT14 Zudomon. This is a no-brainer in this deck. On play, when Digivolving, trash any 2 Digivolution cards from your opponent's Digimon. Then return one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards to the hand. This is a great natural pairing with the new Paledramon because you want to get your jamming checks in early, and if your opponent tries to swing back over that Paledramon, you can Zudomon ACE them, and they are most likely getting bounced to hand. I like 2 copies of the BT5 CrysPaledramon. When Digivolving, trash the bottom Digivolution card of all your opponent's Digimon. The inheritable on this card is, in my opinion, much better than the new Paledramon, or CrysPaledramon. Your turn, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution cards in play, this Digimon gains security attack +1. This just requires your opponent to have a single Digimon with no sources, and it gives any Digimon with this in its sources security attack +1, whereas the new CrysPaledramon is going to be exclusive to the Ice Snow trait, and requires your opponent to have no Digimon with Digivolution sources in exchange for giving Piercing. This is just easier to fulfill, and because this is a Hexeblaumon deck, we are running the old Hexeblaumon as well. This inheritable will work with that Hexeblaumon, whereas the new one does not. So 2 copies of this card is sufficient. If you really don't want to run it, just go up on the Zudomons and you will be fine. We have 3 copies of said EX7 CrysPaledramon. It has Ice Clad, so other than against security Digimon, you compare the number of sources instead of DP in this Digimon's battle. So if you have source stripped your opponent and this Digimon fights it, it will delete them in battle as long as it has more sources. When Digivolving, you're going to trash any 2 Digivolution cards under your opponent's Digimon. Then if your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, this Digimon unsuspends. That ties into our conversation about better aggro in this set for Hexeblaumon. If you get your jamming check with Paledramon and then Digivolve into this, you can unsuspend, leave it up as a blocker because the Paledramon gains blocker. Or if you manage to keep turn while doing that, you can then swing in with this for a second jamming check. The inheritable says your turn while your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, you gain, and this Digimon has the Ice Snow trait, you gain Piercing and Security Attack +1. Just a more specific version of the BT5 inheritable, a little bit worse in that regard, but the effect of the card is certainly much better. For our level 6s, I am on 2 copies of BT5 Hexeblaumon. I understand that this card is, for the most part, just worse than the new Hexeblaumon, but this is a Hexeblaumon deck, so I'm going to run Hexeblaumon. When attacking, trash up to 2 Digivolution cards on the bottom of one of your opponent's Digimon. Then if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution cards in play, this Digimon gains jamming. All turns, your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards can't attack or block. The upside to this card is that you can still strip sources when attacking, whereas the new Hexeblaumon is just going to strip when you Digivolve. Kind of to balance that out is why we're running the level 4s that let you strip when you attack. Obviously, they fit into the archetype, but they also compensate for the new Hexeblaumon not being able to strip sources on attack. This Hexeblaumon you're going to find pairs much more nicely with the old Paledramon that wants to punish your opponent for having no sources, just like this card does. So they get frozen, they can't attack because they have no sources, and then it costs extra memory to swing on top of. This is also a little bit cheaper to evo into, and sometimes it does feel better than the new Hexeblaumon, but it's situational, and you know, at 2 copies you don't see it too often. It is just another Hexeblaumon name and another stun effect. Then we have 4 copies of the new EX7 Hexeblaumon. This has security attack +1 and Ice Clad. When Digivolving, trash any 4 Digivolution cards under your opponent's Digimon. Then if your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, return one of their Tamers to the bottom of the deck. So Tamer Hate, already automatic upgrade. Security attack +1 is just inbuilt aggro. With any of our security attack bonuses, this is going to be swinging 3 checks. Hopefully with jamming, it's going to hit really, really, really hard. Opponent's turn, none of your opponent's Digimon with as many or fewer Digivolution cards as this Digimon can suspend. So they cannot attack, cannot block, and cannot use suspend effects. And the nice thing is they don't have to have 0 sources. They just have to have less than this Hexeblaumon, which in my opinion is just what makes this so much better than the old Hexeblaumon. I think even if this was the same as the old Hexeblaumon and it said as many or fewer than Hexeblaumon, it would just be strictly better. 4 copies is mandatory. That is the point of the deck. Then we're going to 1 copy of the BT16 Vikemon ACE. On play, when Digivolving, de-Digivolve 2 on one of your opponent's Digimon. Then none of their Digimon with 1 or fewer Digivolution cards can suspend until the end of their turn. Really, really devastating hand trap. De-Digivolve 2 just brutalizes some decks. It's a really... I mean, you can't get away from de-Digivolve. It's just always going to wreck you when it hits you. When attacking, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 1 or fewer Digivolution cards. If you are really, really against running the BT5 Hexeblaumon, just go up to 3 Vikemon Aces. This will do the trick just fine. It is technically a board stun on your opponent's cards that have been source stripped, and it's going to clean up the board when attacking by popping bodies with not enough sources. For our level 7s, 1 copy of BT5 Omnimon. You saw that we can get some insane aggression with Hexeblaumon. We can be swinging 2 to 3 checks on any of our boss monsters given the right conditions. So Blitz is just kind of a no-brainer. Even if you have the BT5 CrysPaledramon in your stack, this can swing for 2 Blitz checks. So it's totally possible if your opponent is slacking that you hit them for 3 checks, you swing the Blitz Omni, and now you get 2 more checks, and now your opponent has no security, and all you did was Digivolve into a Hexeblaumon and then a Blitz Omni. So this card's just, it's still really good. With Hexeblaumon, it pairs nicely with the BT5 CrysPaledramon, so 1 copy is enough for me. And the only reason we're running 1 copy is because we need 2 copies of Imperialdramon Paladin Mode Ace. This card has such insane synergy with Hexeblaumon. On play and when Digivolving, you trash all the Digivolution cards of all of your opponent's Digimon, which is what you want to do, and then return all cards in your or your opponent's trash to the bottom of the deck. So you get to place somebody's trash at the bottom of their deck, and then if you return a level 7 white card, you gain 3 memory. So if Omnimon's in your trash, you can return it to the bottom of your deck and gain 3 memory. That's pretty cool. And then when attacking by returning one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards to the bottom of the deck, you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So if your opponent's going wide, this is more than likely just going to clean up the game, clean up their board, and pave the way for victory. So 2 copies of this card synergizes really nicely in this deck. Ideally, your opponent shouldn't be swinging at you anyway, so that you shouldn't get too many opportunities to play this. But when it does come up, it really, really, really makes your opponent's day suck. 2 copies of Absolute Blast. I was running Kaiser Nail here, and yes, I do realize this card is power crept by things like Ice Statue and some other blue options that do what this card does, but better. But I will counter your argument by saying this card has Hexeblaumon on it, so we are running it in our Hexeblaumon deck. Main, trash the bottom Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon, then return one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards to the bottom of its owner's deck. I have found in testing with this deck that sometimes in some matchups we really struggle if we cannot remove a card with a persistent effect from the board, even if it is frozen. Musketeers is a really good example of something that if you can't remove the body, it presents a problem. Beelstar X is a problem. So Absolute Blast gets rid of threats that cannot stay on the board and need to go to the bottom of the deck. 1 copy of Ice Wall because it is really, really good, and there's no reason not to run it. All of your opponent's Digimon gain when attacking lose 2 memory until the end of their next turn. 2 copies of Summon Frost. That's a new option I was talking about earlier. Main, trash the top 2 Digivolution cards of all of your opponent's Digimon. If this effect did not trash, you get to play a level 4 or lower Digimon with the Ice Snow trait from your hand without playing the cost. So this can hit the EX7 Bulucomon, the Sorcerermon, or the Paledramon. Then until the end of your opponent's turn, none of their Digimon with no Digivolution cards can attack. So if they do get around your Hexeblaumon, you can start building your next stack, and then before you pass over, you play the Summon Frost and stop your opponent from swinging in and taking advantage of the removal on the Hexeblaumon. 4 copies of Mental Training. This is our search package. We're going to reveal top 2, grab a blue card, and then delay effect Evo for 2 less. And for the Tamers in the deck, we are running 4 copies of BT14 Joe Kido. On play, trash any 1 Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon, and then your turn when a Digivolution card of an opponent's Digimon is trashed. By suspending this Tamer, gain 1 memory. This card, it kind of feels bad to plop down on turn 1, because you're probably not going to strip a source with it. But every other Joe Kido you play after that is going to feel really, really nice because you're going to get 2 memory back off of it. And, you know, God forbid you hit the 3rd Joe Kido, your opponent is going to have a bad time. You're going to be getting 3 memory back basically every time or every turn because you're going to evolve, strip sources, tap 3, gain 3 memory, and it's going to feel really nice for you. So that is what I have for my Hexeblaumon deck profile. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What are you doing with Hexeblaumon? Are you actually running Hexeblaumon Tribal, or are you splashing him into other decks because he is good enough to do that? Let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.